February 1883. Montana Territory. The wind off the Bitterroot Range cut so cold it made your teeth ache, and the snow came down thick as wool. I was chopping ice off the water trough when I heard wagon wheels crunching through the white. Didn't think much of it, figured someone lost, looking for the main road. Then I saw her, thin as a fence rail, wrapped in rags that might have been a coat once. She climbed down from that wagon slow, like her bones hurt, and she carried something small in her arms. Bundle wrapped in a patchwork quilt, the kind you stitch when you got more time than money. She walked straight to my porch. Didn't knock. Didn't call out. Just fell to her knees in the snow, skirts soaking through, and she didn't seem to notice the cold at all. 5 words. That's all it took to break a man wider than any bullet ever could. "Please, sir, bury my child." I stood there, axe still in my hand, ice crystals caught in my beard, and I felt 8 years of grief come roaring back like a blizzard I'd been hiding from. By sunrise, the marshal would come with ropes and papers. By sunset, 20 men would stand in snow with torches lit, and somewhere between, I'd have to choose. Let the law bury her baby like refuse, or bury my own fear of feeling anything again. The bundle didn't move. That's how I knew. Living babies squirm, cry, fight the cold. This one lay still as stone, wrapped tight in that quilt like someone had tried to keep warmth in long after it mattered. "Ma'am," I said, voice rough from not using it much. "Ma'am, you need to stand. Ground's frozen. You'll catch your death." She looked up at me then, eyes hollow, face thin, lips cracked from cold and thirst. Couldn't have been more than 30, but grief had aged her past counting. "They said no," she whispered. "The undertaker, the reverend, the marshal. They said she's just another dead baby." My chest tightened. I set the axe down careful, like any sudden move might shatter something. "But she's not," the woman continued, voice breaking. "She had a name. Rose. Her name was Rose." I'd spent 8 years keeping folks at arm's length, built a life out of silence and distance, convinced myself that not feeling was the same as not hurting. But standing there, looking at this stranger holding her dead child in my snow, I felt every wall I'd built start to crack. "How old?" I asked. 6 months. Died 2 days ago. Pneumonia. Couldn't get to the doctor through the storm." I knew that feeling. The helplessness. Watching someone slip away while the world just keeps on being cold and hard and uncaring. "You got people?" I asked. "Family?" She shook her head. "Husband died 3 weeks back. Sawmill accident. No kin, no money. Just her." She clutched the bundle tighter. "I walked 12 miles. In the snow, because someone said you buried your own without asking anyone's permission. That hit different. Whoever told her that knew more about me than I'd wanted anyone to know." "I did," I admitted. "My wife. And the son we never got to meet. Under the cottonwood out back." "Then you understand," she said, and her voice carried a desperation that made my bones ache. "Please, I'm begging. They want to put her in the gully, where they throw the unclaimed, no marker, just dirt and lime." The gully. I'd seen it once. Bodies in burlap, stacked like cordwood, covered in quicklime to speed the rot. The county's way of disposing of folks who died without means. Paupers, drifters, anyone the town deemed not worth the cost of a proper grave. "That ain't happening," I heard myself say. Her eyes filled. "You'll help?" I should have said no, should have told her the ground was too frozen, the law too rigid, the risk too high. But I looked at that bundle, thought about my own boy who never drew breath, and the word came out different than sense. "Yeah, I'll help." She sagged with relief, nearly fell. I caught her elbow, steadied her, then helped her stand. She swayed on her feet, exhausted, starving, pushed past any human limit. "When's the last time you ate?" I asked. She blinked, confused by the question. Yesterday morning. Maybe. I don't remember." "Come inside. Warm up. We'll figure this out." I guided her toward the cabin. her clutching that small bundle like it was the only thing tethering her to earth. Behind us, the wind picked up, and through it I heard something else. Hoofbeats. Multiple horses. Coming fast. I turned. 3 riders cresting the ridge, torches lit, despite it being daylight. Leading them, a man in a wool coat with a badge catching the weak sun, Marshal Oswin Fletcher, and he looked like he'd come to settle something permanent. The widow heard them too. Her whole body went rigid. "That's him," she whispered. "He followed me." Fletcher reined up at my gate, 2 deputies flanking him. His voice carried cold and official across the yard. "Brennan, we need to talk about the woman, and about county property she's refusing to surrender." I felt my jaw set. Felt that old familiar burn of knowing a fight was coming whether I wanted it or not. "She ain't surrendering anything," I called back. Fletcher's smile was thin as a knife edge. "Then I reckon we got ourselves a problem." February 1883, Montana Territory. The wind off the Bitterroot Range cut so cold it made your teeth ache, and the snow came down thick as wool. I was chopping ice off the water trough when I heard wagon wheels crunching through the white. Didn't think much of it, figured someone lost, looking for the main road. Then I saw her, thin as a fence rail, wrapped in rags that might have been a coat once. She climbed down from that wagon slow, like her bones hurt, and she carried something small in her arms, bundle wrapped in a patchwork quilt, the kind you stitch when you got more time than money. She walked straight to my porch, didn't knock, didn't call out, just fell to her knees in the snow, skirts soaking through, and she didn't seem to notice the cold at all. 5 words. That's all it took to break a man wider than any bullet ever could. "Please, sir, bury my child." I stood there, axe still in my hand, ice crystals caught in my beard, and I felt 8 years of grief come roaring back like a blizzard I'd been hiding from. By sunrise, the marshal would come with ropes and papers. By sunset, 20 men would stand in snow with torches lit. And somewhere between, I'd have to choose, let the law bury her baby like refuse, or bury my own fear of feeling anything again. The bundle didn't move. That's how I knew. Living babies squirm, cry, fight the cold. This one lay still as stone, wrapped tight in that quilt like someone had tried to keep warmth in long after it mattered. "Ma'am," I said, voice rough from not using it much. "Ma'am, you need to stand. Ground's frozen. You'll catch your death." She looked up at me then, eyes hollow, face thin, lips cracked from cold and thirst. Couldn't have been more than 30, but grief had aged her past counting. "They said no," she whispered. "The undertaker, the reverend, the marshal. They said she's just another dead baby." My chest tightened. I set the axe down careful, like any sudden move might shatter something. "But she's not," the woman continued, voice breaking. "She had a name. Rose. Her name was Rose." I'd spent 8 years keeping folks at arm's length. Built a life out of silence and distance, convinced myself that not feeling was the same as not hurting. But standing there, looking at this stranger holding her dead child in my snow, I felt every wall I'd built start to crack. "How old?" I asked. "6 months. Died 2 days ago. Pneumonia. Couldn't get to the doctor through the storm." I knew that feeling. The helplessness. Watching someone slip away while the world just keeps on being cold and hard and uncaring. "You got people?" I asked. "Family?" She shook her head. "Husband died 3 weeks back. Sawmill accident. No kin, no money. Just her." She clutched the bundle tighter. "I walked 12 miles in the snow because someone said you buried your own without asking anyone's permission." That hit different. Whoever told her that knew more about me than I'd wanted anyone to know. "I did," I admitted. "My wife. And the son we never got to meet. Under the cottonwood out back." "Then you understand," she said, and her voice carried a desperation that made my bones ache. "Please, I'm begging." "They want to put her in the gully, where they throw the unclaimed, no marker, just dirt and lime." The gully. I'd seen it once. Bodies in burlap, stacked like cordwood, covered in quicklime to speed the rot. The county's way of disposing of folks who died without means. Paupers, drifters, anyone the town deemed not worth the cost of a proper grave. That ain't happening, I heard myself say. Her eyes filled. You'll help? I should have said no. Should have told her the ground was too frozen, the law too rigid, the risk too high. But I looked at that bundle, thought about my own boy who never drew breath, and the word came out different than sense. Yeah, I'll help. She sagged with relief, nearly fell. I caught her elbow, steadied her, then helped her stand. She swayed on her feet, exhausted, starving, pushed past any human limit. When's the last time you ate? I asked. She blinked, confused by the question. Yesterday morning. Maybe. I don't remember. Come inside. Warm up. We'll figure this out. I guided her toward the cabin, her clutching that small bundle like it was the only thing tethering her to earth. Behind us, the wind picked up, and through it I heard something else. Hoofbeats, multiple horses, coming fast. I turned. 3 riders cresting the ridge, torches lit despite it being daylight. Leading them, a man in a wool coat with a badge catching the weak sun. Marshal Oswin Fletcher. And he looked like he'd come to settle something permanent. The widow heard them too. Her whole body went rigid. That's him, she whispered. He followed me. Fletcher reined up at my gate, 2 deputies flanking him. His voice carried cold and official across the yard. Brennan, we need to talk about the woman, and about county property she's refusing to surrender. I felt my jaw set, felt that old familiar burn of knowing a fight was coming whether I wanted it or not. She ain't surrendering anything, I called back. Fletcher's smile was thin as a knife edge. Then I reckon we got ourselves a problem. I brought her inside, settled her by the fire. The cabin was cold. I'd let it die down to coals while I worked outside. Now I built it back up, adding split logs until flames caught and warmth began to creep into the room. Marjorie sat rigid in the chair, still holding Rose. Hadn't let go since she'd fallen to her knees in my yard. I set water to boil in the kettle, pulled out what food I had. Wasn't much. Dried venison, hard bread, some molasses, bachelor rations. But it was something. When'd you last eat? I asked again. She blinked, like the question came from far away. Yesterday, maybe the day before. I don't. Her voice trailed off. I tore bread, drizzled molasses over it, handed it to her. Eat. She took it with one hand, the other still cradling Rose. Ate mechanical, like her body remembered what to do, even if her mind was somewhere else. While she ate, I moved around the cabin doing small tasks. Lit the second lamp. Something I hadn't done in years. One lamp was enough for a man alone, but with company, the extra light felt necessary. Swept the floor, added wood to the fire, found a clean blanket, draped it over the back of her chair. Normal things. Human things. The kind of care that says you're not alone anymore. When the water boiled, I made weak coffee, set a cup in her hands. She wrapped both palms around it, soaking in the warmth. I need to. She looked down at Rose. I need to prepare her. Before she's buried. Can't let her go to ground dirty. The request hit me hard. That last act of motherhood, washing a child who'd never be washed again. I'll heat more water, I said. You can use the basin. Take your time. I filled the basin, set it near the fire to warm. Found a clean cloth, one of Martha's, kept all these years. Seemed right somehow. One mother's cloth serving another mother's need. Marjorie unwrapped Rose slowly, revealing tiny limbs, a small face peaceful as sleep. She was dressed in a simple gown, hand-stitched, worn thin but clean, the kind of thing made with love and not much else. I turned away, gave her privacy. Busied myself at the stove, though there was nothing to do there. Just listened to the soft sounds of water, of cloth on skin, of a mother murmuring things I couldn't hear and wasn't meant to. When she finished, Rose was wrapped fresh in the quilt, the pink ribbon tied careful around her hair. What little there was. She's ready, Marjorie whispered. I nodded. Started to speak when I heard it. Footsteps outside, boots on frozen ground, moving slow, deliberate. Then voices, low, multiple, men. I moved to the window, peered through the gap in the curtain. 3 figures stood at the edge of my property, torches lit. Not Fletcher this time, townsman. I recognized one, Harlan, who ran the general store. Another worked at the mill. They weren't coming closer, just standing, watching, making sure I knew they were there. Marjorie saw my face. "What is it?" "Town's watching," I said. "Word's spread you're here." Her hands tightened on Rose. "They'll come for us." "Not tonight." Fletcher said sunset. "They're just—" I searched for the word. "Reminding me." But as I watched, one of the men bent down. When he straightened, he'd drawn something in the snow with a stick. Even from here, I could make out the shape. A noose. I let the curtain fall, jaw tight. A knock at the door. Not pounding like Fletcher, softer, almost polite. But somehow that made it worse. "Mr. Brennan?" A voice I didn't recognize. "We ain't here to cause trouble. Just wanted to make sure you understand the situation." I moved to the door but didn't open it. "I understand plenty." "Do you? 'Cause folks are saying you're harboring a vagrant, interfering with county business. That ain't gonna end well for you." "She ain't a vagrant. She's a widow who lost her child." "Maybe so. But law's the law, and Fletcher's got the whole town behind him on this one. You keep her here, you'll lose more than your barn." The threat hung in the cold air between the door and me. "Thanks for the warning," I said flatly. Footsteps retreated, but I knew they hadn't gone far. Just back to watching. Waiting. I turned to find Marjorie standing, Rose held close. Her face was pale, but her voice was steady. "I should go. Before they—" "No." The word came out harder than I meant. "You're staying. We're figuring this out. Together. But your home, is mine to risk." I met her eyes. "You walked 12 miles through snow to find help." "Well, you found it, and I ain't the kind of man who opens a door just to close it when things get hard." She looked at me for a long moment, then nodded, something like hope flickering in her exhausted face. Outside, the torches burned. Inside, the fire crackled warm. And between us, wrapped in a worn quilt, a baby named Rose waited for dawn and whatever it would bring. Fletcher dismounted slow, making a show of it. His boots hit the frozen ground with authority, and the deputies followed suit, hands resting easy on their holsters. Not threatening yet, but the promise was there. "Mrs. Crane," Fletcher said, addressing the widow like I wasn't standing between them, "you need to come with us. Resolve this matter properly." "Properly?" Marjorie's voice shook but held. "You mean the gully?" Fletcher's face tightened. "We have procedures for the indigent." "Her husband paid his dues," I said. "Worked 3 years at that mill. Where's his wages?" "Owed to the company." "Debts and damages." Fletcher pulled a folded paper from his coat. "All legal, and the child needs disposal according to county ordinance. Pauper's Burial Act of 1872. Disposal. The word tasted like ash. "That what you call it when you throw babies in a ditch?" The deputies shifted. One of them, younger, looked away. Fletcher's jaw worked. "The law's the law, Brennan. You of all people should know that keeping order means following rules, even hard ones." "Hard ones," I repeated. "That what lets you sleep at night?" "What lets me sleep is knowing this town runs decent, clean, respectable." He stepped closer. "Not dragged down by charity cases we can't afford." Marjorie made a sound, half sob, half rage. "My baby's not a case. She's a person. She was alive. She had my eyes. She knew my voice." For just a moment, something flickered across Fletcher's face. Something almost human. Then it was gone, buried under that badge. "Ma'am, I understand you're grieving. But the law ain't about law." I cut him off. "This is about you deciding who matters and who don't. And I'm telling you right now, she matters. That baby matters. Fletcher's hand drifted toward his gun belt, not to his weapon, just near it. A reminder. You're making this harder than it needs to be, he said quietly. I could charge you with obstruction, interference with county duties. You'd lose this land, Brennan. Everything you got left. Then I lose it standing up. The words hung in the cold air. Behind me, I heard Marjorie's sharp intake of breath. Fletcher studied me for a long moment. Then he nodded, like I'd confirmed something he already knew. So be it. He turned to his deputies. Mark the property. Seizure order pending resolution of county business. One deputy pulled out a hammer and metal seal, started toward my door. Don't, I said. The deputy stopped, looked to Fletcher. Do it, Fletcher ordered. The hammer rang out 3 times. The seal, official, cold, final, was now nailed to my doorframe, a brand marking me as outside the law's protection. Fletcher mounted his horse. You got till sunset, Brennan. Bring her and the remains to the county office, or I'm coming back with more than words. They rode off, snow kicking up behind them. I stood there, feeling the weight of what I'd just done. The widow came up beside me, still holding Rose. I've ruined you, she said softly. No, you just made me remember something I'd forgotten. What's that? That some things are worth losing everything for. We went inside. I set her by the fire, wrapped a blanket around her shoulders, put water on to boil. She sat rigid, staring at nothing, that bundle in her lap. Tell me about her, I said while I worked. About Rose. Marjorie blinked, surprised. What? Your daughter. Tell me about her. Her eyes filled, but she smiled through it. She had this laugh, like bells. And she'd grab my finger, hold on so tight. My husband, Elwood, he'd sing to her, old songs his mama taught him. She'd go quiet, just listen, like she understood every word. I set a cup of weak broth in her hands. She sipped it, continued. The day before he died, Elwood brought home a ribbon, pink. Said it was for when her hair grew long. She pulled the ribbon from her pocket, worn and treasured. He never got to see her wear it. I took the ribbon, held it to the light. We'll make sure she's buried with it, and a proper marker, with her name. How? Fletcher said. Fletcher don't own the truth. He just thinks he does. I pulled on my coat. There's people in this town with longer memories than his. We just need to wake them up. Where are you going? To talk to someone who remembers what decency looks like. I stepped back outside. The sky had darkened, snow starting again. Through the white, I could see smoke rising from the direction of town. Too much smoke. And too organized. My gut clenched. I ran to the hillside, looked down toward my barn a quarter-mile off. Orange flames punched through the gray afternoon, black smoke billowing. The structure was already half gone, roof collapsed inward. No accident. The torch marks were visible even from here. Too many points of origin, too deliberate. Marjorie appeared beside me, gasping. Oh God, your barn. Fletcher's message, I said, voice flat. Showing what happens when you don't bow. In the distance, riders disappeared over the ridge. 3 of them, moving fast. I felt something shift inside me then. Not anger exactly, colder than that, clearer. They took my barn, I said quietly. Figure that makes me weak. But a man with nothing left to lose? I looked at Marjorie. That's the most dangerous kind. She met my eyes, saw something there that made her stand straighter. What do we do? We fight, but not his way. I turned back toward the cabin. Get what you need. We're going to town, tonight. But Fletcher said, I know what he said, and I'm saying different. I pulled open the door, grabbed my rifle from above the mantel, not to use, just to have. There's an undertaker in Townsend owes me a debt, and a reverend who's forgotten what his vows mean. Time to remind them. Behind us, my barn burned. The smoke rose black against white snow, a column marking the end of my old life and the beginning of something I couldn't name yet. But I knew this much. I'd spent 8 years running from grief. Tonight, I was running straight at it. and God help anyone who got in the way. We loaded what little Marjorie had into my wagon, just the bundle with Rose, a worn canvas satchel, and that pink ribbon. The barn still burned behind us, painting the snow orange, but I didn't look back. Looking back wouldn't save the wood or the years I'd spent in that building. Looking forward might save what mattered now. The ride into Townsend took an hour through fresh snow. Cold bit through wool made the horse labor. Marjorie sat beside me, silent, holding Rose like the child might still need warmth. I didn't tell her different. Sometimes what we hold on to is all that keeps us from flying apart. Halfway there, she spoke. "Why are you doing this?" I didn't answer right away. Watched the road, the snow, the gray sky pressing down. "You ever have something you couldn't fix?" I finally said. "Something that happened and you just had to live with it? No going back? No making it right?" "Yes." "Well," I adjusted the reins. "Maybe this is my chance to fix something I couldn't before, even if it ain't the same thing, even if it don't bring back what I lost." She was quiet a moment, then, "Your son. Never got to bury him proper. Martha neither, really. I put them under that tree because I couldn't stand the thought of them in the church cemetery. Everyone staring, pitying. Thought I was protecting their memory, but maybe I was just protecting myself. And now? Now I'm done protecting myself." I met her eyes. "Your daughter deserves better than the gully, and if helping her means I finally face what I've been running from, then I reckon it's past time." The lights of Townsend appeared through the snow. Small town, maybe 300 souls, one main street lined with false front buildings trying to look bigger than they were. The general store, the hotel, the saloon with its painted sign, and at the end of the street, set back from the road, the undertaker's shop. I pulled up outside Clyde Whitmore's place. The windows were dark, but lamplight showed through the back workshop. I could hear hammering, steady, rhythmic, the sound of a man working late. "Stay here," I told Marjorie. "No." Her voice was firm. "She's my daughter. I stay with her." I nodded. We climbed down together. The workshop door was unlocked. Inside, sawdust hung in the air, and the smell of pine and varnish filled my nose. Clyde stood at his bench, back to us, hammering finish nails into a coffin lid. A fancy one. Oak, brass handles, satin lining visible through the gap. "Clyde," I said. He spun, hammer raised, then lowered it when he saw me. His face went from surprise to something like shame. "Silas, I can't help you." "Can't or won't." "Fletcher's got me by the throat. Gambling debts. He owns the notes. I don't comply, he calls them in, I lose the shop." Clyde set the hammer down. Wouldn't meet my eyes. "I got a business to run. A life. I can't throw it away For what? Say it." He flinched. "For a woman I don't know, and a baby that's already gone." Marjorie stepped forward into the light. Rose's bundle was visible in her arms now, the quilt carefully folded back to show the tiny face, peaceful as sleep. "Her name's Rose," Marjorie said quietly. "Rose Elaine Crane. She was 6 months old. She liked when I sang to her. She'd grab my finger and hold on like I was the whole world." Her voice cracked but held. "And she deserves wood and nails, just like whoever's going in that fancy box you're building." Clyde stared at Rose. His face worked, something breaking behind his eyes. I, he swallowed hard. "I've been building coffins for 30 years, pine for the poor, oak for the rich, never thought much about it. Just wood, just work." "It ain't just wood," I said. "It's the last house a person gets, the last thing between them and the dirt. And you're telling me some folks don't deserve that?" Clyde's hands trembled. He looked at his workshop, the tools, the lumber, the half-finished casket. Then back at Rose. "Fletcher finds out I helped you, I'm finished." "Then don't help me," I said. "Help her." I nodded to Marjorie. "Help a mother bury her child right. That ain't about Fletcher or debts or business. That's about being human." The hammering stopped. The silence stretched, broken only by wind rattling the windows. Then Clyde moved, walked to the back corner of his shop where canvas tarps covered shapes I couldn't make out. He pulled one back, a small coffin, child-sized, pine, simple, but sanded smooth as glass. The corners were dovetailed, careful work, not rushed, and lined inside with clean white cotton. "Been working on it nights," Clyde said, voice thick. "Since Mrs. Crane first came asking. Couldn't do it openly. Fletcher watches. But I couldn't. I couldn't just let it be." Marjorie's breath caught. She moved toward the coffin like drawn by something beyond will. Set Rose down gently, then ran her hand along the smooth wood. "You made this. For her?" "For any child," Clyde said. "For the ones Fletcher says don't matter." He looked at me. "You were right, Silas. It ain't just wood. And I've been treating it like it was for too damn long." A sound outside. Horses. Multiple riders moving slow down the street. I moved to the window, peered through a gap in the curtain. 6 men on horseback, torches lit despite the hour. Fletcher in the lead. "They're coming," I said. Clyde's face went pale. "He knows you're here. Probably figured where I'd go." I turned to Marjorie. "We need to move. Now." "Where?" she asked. "Good question. The hotel would turn us away. Fletcher's influence. The saloon was no place for this. The marshal's office was obviously out. That left." "The church," I said. Clyde shook his head. "Stone won't help. He's more scared of Fletcher than I am." "Maybe. But churches have rules older than marshals. Sanctuary. If we can get inside before Fletcher stops us." "You'll just be trapped," Clyde finished. "Trapped or not, it's neutral ground. Gives us time." I looked at him. "You coming?" Clyde hesitated. I could see it in his face, the war between fear and conscience, between what was safe and what was right. Then he grabbed the small coffin, lifted it like it weighed nothing. "Hell with it. I spent 30 years building boxes and being afraid. Tonight I build something that matters." Outside, the horses were close now, voices calling, looking for us. We slipped out the back. Clyde knew the alleys, led us through narrow passages between buildings. Snow had drifted here, untouched, and we left tracks, but there was no helping it. The church was 3 blocks away, up a slight hill. Its steeple was visible against the dark sky, the cross on top catching moonlight that broke through clouds. Marjorie carried Rose in her arms. Clyde carried the coffin. I had my rifle, though I prayed I wouldn't need it. We were halfway to the church when a rider appeared at the alley mouth behind us. Young deputy, the one who'd looked away earlier. "Stop!" he called. "Marshal's orders." We kept moving. The deputy followed, horse picking careful steps through the snow. I said stop. "Don't make me—" I turned, rifle not raised, but visible. "Son, think real hard about what you're doing. You really want to shoot a man for trying to bury a baby?" The deputy's hand hovered over his gun. He looked at us, at Marjorie clutching her child, at Clyde carrying that small coffin, at me standing between them and any harm. His hand fell away from his weapon. "I didn't see you," he said quietly. Then louder for anyone who might be listening. "They went east, toward the mill." He wheeled his horse and rode off, calling false directions into the night. "Go," I said. We reached the church. The front door was locked, but the side vestry door was open. Stone never remembered to lock it. We pushed inside, into darkness that smelled of candle wax and old hymnals. Clyde set the coffin on a pew. Marjorie laid Rose inside it, arranging her carefully, tucking that pink ribbon beside her. "Now what?" Clyde asked, breathing hard. I moved to the window. Through wavy glass I could see torches gathering in the street. Fletcher had found our trail. "Now," I said, "we see if Reverend Stone remembers what his church is actually for." Footsteps on the stairs behind us. A lamp appeared, held by a man in a nightshirt, gray hair wild from sleep. Reverend Isaiah Stone stared at us like we were ghosts. "Brennan, what in God's name?" "Exactly," I said. "In God's name. We're asking for sanctuary." Stone's eyes went from me to Marjorie to the small coffin. Understanding and fear warred on his face. "Fletcher's outside," he whispered. "I know. He'll burn the church down. Maybe, or maybe he'll remember it's still 1883 and churches still mean something. Outside, Fletcher's voice rang out, amplified by cold and anger. "Stone! I know they're in there! Send them out or I'm coming in!" The Reverend stood frozen, lamp shaking in his hand. This was the moment. The hinge point where good men decide whether to be good or just comfortable. "Please," Marjorie said softly. "Reverend, please. She's just a baby. She just needs rest." Stone looked at Rose's small face in the coffin, looked at Marjorie's pleading eyes, looked at me, standing ready to defend them both. Then he set his lamp down, straightened his nightshirt like it was vestments, and walked to the church door. He opened it, stood in the threshold facing Fletcher and his men, and in a voice that shook but held, said 5 words I didn't expect. "This is God's house. Come morning, we'll talk terms. But tonight, they have sanctuary, and you'll respect it or answer to higher authority than a badge." Fletcher's face went purple with rage. But he didn't cross the threshold. Some things, even corrupt men won't break. We'd bought ourselves until dawn. The church held its breath. Outside, Fletcher's torches burned like angry stars, casting shadows that danced on the stained glass. Inside, we sat in pews worn smooth by generations of prayer, waiting for dawn or judgment, whichever came first. Stone brought coffee from the rectory, weak, bitter, but hot. We drank it in silence at first, the 4 of us scattered across the front pews like survivors of a shipwreck clinging to different pieces of the same boat. Clyde sat hunched, elbows on knees, staring at Rose's coffin on the altar. "Never thought I'd break the law in a church," he muttered. "You're not breaking law," Stone said quietly. "You're honoring it. The real kind. The kind that predates Fletcher's paperwork." Marjorie looked up at him, surprised. The Reverend caught her expression and almost smiled. "Don't look shocked, Mrs. Crane. I may be a coward most days, but even cowards remember their vows when pushed." He set his coffee down. "Besides, I've been thinking about your husband's tithes." "What about them?" I asked. Stone walked to his office, returned with a leather-bound ledger, opened it across his lap, ran his finger down columns of names and dates. Elwood Crane, paid faithfully, January, December, November. He kept tracing backward. 3 years of regular payment, never missed once. "He said it was for Rose's baptism someday," Marjorie whispered. Stone nodded slowly. "By church covenant, it's an old bylaw, territorial days. If a member dies with tithes current, the church guarantees burial rights for immediate family. Spouse, children, no additional payment required." The words hung in the air like something too fragile to touch. "You mean," I started. "I mean, Mrs. Crane has legal right to cemetery burial, and as church elder, I have authority to enforce it, even against a county marshal." Stone looked at Fletcher's torches outside, swallowed hard. "Assuming I have the spine to actually do it," Marjorie's hand went to her mouth. But Fletcher said, "Fletcher doesn't know every bylaw in every church registry. He just assumed no one would look." Stone's voice gained strength. "Well, I looked. And the law, the real law, the one written when this territory was nothing but hope and hard ground, that law says your daughter gets buried proper." For the first time since I'd met her, Marjorie smiled. Small, tentative, but real. "Thank you," she breathed. "Reverend, thank you." Stone ducked his head, embarrassed by his own courage. "Don't thank me yet. Fletcher won't take this lying down." He was right. But for now, for this moment, we had hope. Something concrete to stand on, besides just defiance. Clyde stood, walked to Rose's coffin, adjusted the ribbon that had slipped. "She ought to have flowers," he said. "When we bury her, flowers and songs and everything proper." "She will," I promised. We talked through the night in low voices. Marjorie told us about Elwood, how he'd proposed by the river, nervous as a colt, ring carved from a button. How he'd sung off-key but enthusiastic. How he'd cried when Rose was born, held her like she was made of light. Stone confessed he'd wanted to help from the start, but fear had locked his jaw. I kept thinking about the church, the building, keeping the doors open. But what good are open doors if no one decent walks through them? Clyde admitted he'd been building Rose's coffin in secret for a week. Couldn't sleep. Kept seeing her in my mind. No child should go in the ground wrapped in burlap. So I built. Didn't know if I'd ever have the guts to give it to you. But here we are. I told them about Martha, about holding her hand while she slipped away, the midwife's sad eyes, the silence where a baby's cry should have been, about burying them alone under the cottonwood because I couldn't face the town's pity. Maybe that's why I couldn't turn away from you, I said to Marjorie, because I know what it's like when nobody stands with you at the grave. She reached across the pew, squeezed my hand. You're standing now. Dawn crept through the windows, turning darkness gray. The torches outside had burned low, but Fletcher's men hadn't left. I could see their shapes huddled around a barrel fire, waiting. Stone stood, stretched his back. I'll draft the certificate. Burial rights for Rose Elaine Crane, by church covenant and territorial bylaw. He looked at us. At noon we bury her, in the cemetery, with full Christian rites. And if Fletcher tries to stop us, the church door rattled. Not a knock, a kick. We all stood. I grabbed my rifle. But the voice that called through wasn't Fletcher's. It was younger, breathless with running. Mr. Brennan, Reverend, it's Tommy. Let me in. Stone unbarred the door. The sawmill boy stumbled through, face red from cold and exertion. Your ranch, Tommy gasped. The house is burning. They torched it at dawn. Fletcher's men. I saw them right away. The words hit like a fist. My house, the one Martha and I had built, log by log, the one that held every memory I had left of her, gone. Marjorie stood beside me. Silas, I'm so... Don't. My voice came out flat, dead. Don't apologize for him being evil. I walked to the window, looked toward the horizon. Even from here, miles away, I could see the smoke. A black column rising into gray morning, marking the place I'd called home for 20 years. Everything I owned, her things, his things, the life we'd tried to build, ash now. Stone put a hand on my shoulder. I'm sorry, son. Honor ain't land, I heard myself say. Remembered those words from somewhere. It's how you stand after you fall. I turned back to face them, saw their worried faces, their fear for me, their anger at Fletcher. We bury her at noon, I said, like we planned. He can burn every building I ever touched, won't change what's right. But even as I said it, I felt the weight. The knowledge that Fletcher had just raised the stakes beyond anything I could match. He had the law, the men, the power, and now he'd proven he'd use it all to crush anyone who opposed him. What did I have? A dead man's tithes and 3 people who'd found their spines in the dark. It would have to be enough. They came for us at mid-morning. Not Fletcher this time. He'd sent 6 deputies with a writ and iron shackles. They surrounded the church, rifles ready, faces hard as the frozen ground. The leader pounded on the door. Silas Brennan, by order of Marshal Fletcher, you're under arrest for arson, destruction of county property, and obstruction of justice. Stone looked at me confused. Arson? Your own home? He's claiming I burned it myself, I said, already understanding Fletcher's play. Insurance fraud, probably. Or trying to frame him. Doesn't matter what's true, matters what he can make stick. You can't go out there, Marjorie said. I don't. They'll drag us all out, including you. I checked my rifle. Empty. I'd used the last shells months ago and never replaced them. Just as well. This wasn't a fight bullets would win. Take care of Rose. Make sure she gets proper burial, no matter what. Silas, promise me. She nodded, tears streaming. I promise. I set the rifle down and walked to the door. Stone tried to stop me, but I shook my head. They want me, they got me. But you keep that certificate safe. Bury her at noon like we said. I opened the door. The deputy grabbed me before I'd crossed the threshold, spun me around, wrenched my arms behind my back. The shackles were cold and heavy, old iron stained rust brown with other men's blood. They locked tight enough to bite. Silas Brennan, the deputy announced loud enough for the growing crowd to hear, you're charged with arson of your own property, destruction of evidence, and obstruction of lawful county business. He shoved me forward. Move. They marched me down the church steps. Main Street had filled with people, shopkeepers, families, workers heading to the mill. All stopped to watch. Some faces showed sympathy, most showed fear. A few showed satisfaction, like seeing a man brought low confirmed something they'd always suspected. Mrs. Yates, the grocer's wife, called out, "This ain't right." A deputy turned toward her. "Ma'am, stay out of county business." She fell silent. They all did. That's what fear does. It makes good people quiet, except one. Beatrice Hollis stepped out of the crowd. Old, weathered, spine straight as a church steeple despite 70 years. She planted herself in the street, directly in our path. "Deputy," she said calmly, "you're making a mistake." "Mrs. Hollis, please step aside. When you arrest a man for trying to bury a baby—" "No, sir. I will not step aside." The deputy's hand went to his gun. "Ma'am, I'm warning you. Warn all you like. I remember when you were 6 years old, wetting yourself at Sunday school. Don't you threaten me with that pistol, boy." Despite everything, I nearly smiled. The deputy's face reddened, but he didn't draw. Some things run deeper than badges. They steered around Beatrice, kept pushing me toward the jail. Behind me, I heard her voice carry, "This town ought to be ashamed, treating a man like this for showing mercy." A few murmurs of agreement. Not many, not enough. The jail was stone-walled, cold, smelling of mildew and old fear. They threw me in a cell, bars rust-pitted but solid. Marjorie was brought in minutes later, shoved into the adjacent cell. She could reach through the bars to me, but not touch. "They're calling me a vagrant," she said, voice hollow. "Said I was trespassing, refusing lawful orders." "It's all Fletcher," I said, "making up charges to keep us locked till he figures out how to make them stick." Hours crawled. No food, no water, just cold stone and the sound of our own breathing. The window was too high to see out, but I could track time by the light, morning turning to noon, noon to afternoon, noon. The time we were supposed to bury Rose. "She won't get buried today," Marjorie whispered. "Will she?" Before I could answer, a voice came from the cell on my other side. One I hadn't known was occupied. "Depends who's holding the shovel." I turned. In the shadows I could make out a man, weathered, dark-skinned, long hair streaked with gray. "Who are you?" I asked. "Name's Josiah. Apache. Been here 3 weeks. They'll try me tomorrow for trespass, for walking on land my grandfather's buried under." "That's legal?" "Sure is. Just no." He moved into the light. His eyes were sharp, knowing. "But law and justice, friend, they're like tracks in snow. Sometimes they run together, sometimes they split wide. What's that mean for us? Means you wait, you watch, and when the tracks cross again, you run like hell." He settled back against the wall. "Also means Fletcher's gonna push for a trial, fast one, before anyone starts asking questions he don't want asked." As if summoned, footsteps echoed in the corridor. A deputy slid a paper under my cell door. I picked it up, read by the failing light. Notice: trial set for dawn. Charges: arson, obstruction, unlawful detention of county property, referring to Rose's body. Sentencing immediate upon conviction. Recommended penalty: hanging, arson. 5 years labor, obstruction. My hands didn't shake. Maybe they should have, but I'd made my peace back at the church. If standing up for Marjorie meant a rope, then at least I'd die for something that mattered. Marjorie read her own notice. Started to cry. Not loud, just quiet tears that made no sound. I reached through the bars. She reached back. Our fingers met in the space between iron, held tight. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry." "Don't be. I chose this, and I'd choose it again." Outside, the sound of hammering started. Rhythmic, methodical, ominous. "What's that?" Marjorie asked. Josiah answered from his cell, voice grim. "Gallows. They built 'em the night before." The hammering continued, each strike like a countdown. One more night, that's all I had. One more night before they put a rope around my neck and made an example out of mercy. I thought about Martha and the son I never held. Thought about Rose in her small coffin, waiting. Thought about how strange it was that trying to help someone bury their child might be the last thing I ever did. But if that's what I was dying for, then I'd die knowing I'd finally stopped running from grief and started running towards something better. The candle on the corridor wall burned low. Marjorie's hand was cold in mine. And outside, in the dark Montana night, the gallows rose timber by timber, waiting for dawn. They came for us when the sky was still more black than gray. No breakfast, no water, just the scrape of keys and the deputy's flat voice. Time. They shackled us both, led us down the corridor, up the stairs, out into cold that bit through cloth and skin straight to bone. The town square was already full, maybe 100 people, bundled against the wind, breath steaming in the pre-dawn dark. A platform had been erected overnight. Rough lumber, hasty construction, but the noose hanging from its crossbeam looked professional enough. 13 coils. That's how many it takes to break a neck clean if the rope's tied right. I'd seen hangings before, never thought I'd be the one climbing those steps. Fletcher stood at the platform's base, dressed in his best coat, badge polished bright. Beside him, a table had been set up, makeshift courthouse. 12 men sat on a bench behind it, the jury. All of them shopkeepers or business owners. All of them dependent on Fletcher's goodwill to operate. This wasn't a trial, it was a performance. They marched us up to stand before the table. The crowd pressed close, faces lit by torches. Some I recognized, Mrs. Yates, the grocer, Old Man Chen from the laundry. Others were strangers, drawn by the spectacle of watching law grind someone under its wheel. Fletcher didn't sit. He stood, tall and official, and addressed the crowd more than us. Gentlemen of the jury, citizens of Townsend, this is a simple matter. The accused, Silas Brennan, destroyed his own property to defraud insurance and frame county officials. When confronted, he harbored a vagrant who refused lawful burial procedures. He assaulted deputies. That's a lie, I said. Fletcher's eyes cut to me. The defendant will speak when spoken to, or be gagged. A deputy stepped forward with a cloth. I fell silent. Wouldn't give Fletcher the satisfaction of shutting my mouth by force. Fletcher continued. The evidence is clear. Torch marks at the property. Witness testimony from 3 men who saw the defendant acting suspicious near his barn. Deliberate defiance of county ordinance regarding pauper burials. He pulled out papers, laid them on the table one by one. Each looked official. Stamps, signatures, seals, all lies, but dressed up fancy. The law exists to maintain order, Fletcher said, voice rising. Without it, we're no better than animals. And when a man places himself above the law, when he decides his feelings matter more than our collective peace, he becomes a threat. Not just to himself, but to every decent person in this town. A few heads nodded in the crowd. Fear of chaos runs deep in small towns. People need to believe the system works, even when it's crushing someone in front of them. I'd like to speak, I said. Fletcher smiled. The defendant may address the court, briefly. I turned to face the jury, the crowd, the whole assembled judgment. I'm not going to claim I didn't break Fletcher's rules. I did. He told me to hand over Mrs. Crane and let her baby get dumped in the gully. I refused. That's the truth of it. Fletcher's smile widened. So you admit? I admit I chose mercy over his paperwork. I admit I thought a 6-month-old baby deserved better than lime and dirt and no marker. I admit I remembered what it feels like to bury someone you love without anyone standing with you. My voice caught, but I pushed through. And I admit I'd do it again. Every time. Because some things matter more than keeping quiet and following orders. Silence. The crowd shifted, uncomfortable. The defendant's feelings are noted, Fletcher said. But feelings don't trump law. And the jury will deliberate. Wait, a voice called from the crowd. Beatrice Hollis pushed forward. She'd been there the whole time, I realized, waiting. Mrs. Hollis, Fletcher said, voice tight. This isn't the time. Oh, I think it is. Beatrice climbed onto the platform uninvited. A deputy moved to stop her. She fixed him with a look that could have frozen fire. He stepped back. You want to talk about law and order, Oswin Fletcher? Then let's talk about it, properly. Fletcher's jaw worked. Ma'am, I don't know what you think. I think you're a hypocrite. The word cracked like a whip. I think you enforce laws that hurt you when you were young and powerless. And now that you got power, you're using it to hurt others the same way. That's slander. That's truth, and you know it. Beatrice turned to the crowd. 40 years ago, my daughter died, 7 months old. They wouldn't bury her in the church cemetery. Said she wasn't baptized, wasn't viable. You know where she went? The crowd murmured. Some of the older folks knew. I could see it in their faces. The gully, Beatrice continued. Same place Fletcher wants to put this baby now. And you know who else went there? Who else got thrown in that hole like they never mattered? Fletcher's face had gone white. Beatrice, don't. Your mother, Oswin. She said it loud enough for everyone to hear. Alice Fletcher died without a penny in 1843, and her own sons, you and Robert, you were too ashamed, too poor, too proud to ask for help. So she went to the gully. Gasps rippled through the crowd. This was news. Fletcher had hidden his origins well, built a reputation on respectability and order. No one knew he'd come from nothing. But that's not the whole story, Beatrice continued. Because one man did help. One man dug a grave on his own land and buried Alice proper, under a cottonwood tree, gave her dignity when her own sons couldn't. She pointed at me. Silas Brennan buried your mother, Oswin, for free, because it was the right thing to do. And now you repay him by burning his home and putting a noose around his neck? The silence was absolute. Even the wind seemed to stop. Fletcher's mouth opened, closed. His hands trembled. I didn't know he— You didn't want to know, Beatrice snapped. Because knowing means feeling. And you've been running from shame so long you forgot what honor looks like. Before Fletcher could respond, another voice cut through the crowd. She's right. A man stepped forward. Well-dressed, older, face weathered but kind. I recognized him vaguely. Saw him at church sometimes. Robert Fletcher, the man said. Oswin's older brother. Fletcher spun. Robert, what are you doing here? Stopping you before you destroy what's left of our name. Robert climbed up beside Beatrice. Addressed the crowd. Everything she said is true. Our mother died poor. Silas Brennan helped me bury her when no one else would. He asked nothing in return, expected nothing, just did it because it needed doing. He turned to his brother. And you? You got yourself a badge and decided to erase where we came from. Thought if you enforced the law hard enough, people would forget you started at the bottom. But all you've done is become the thing that hurt us. You've become the man who looks at a baby and sees county property instead of a life that mattered. Fletcher's face crumpled. Not anger now, something worse. Shame, exposed and raw. I was just trying to do right, he whispered. Trying to keep order, keep the town decent. By throwing babies in ditches? Robert's voice was sad, not angry. That's not decent, brother. That's just fear wearing a badge. Fletcher's shoulders sagged. He looked at me, then at Marjorie, then at the crowd that had gathered to watch him exercise power, and instead saw him stripped bare. He swallowed hard. I was wrong. About my mother. About running from it. About— His voice broke. About all of it. The moment stretched. I could feel the crowd's confusion. They'd come expecting judgment and received confession instead. Fletcher turned to the jury. I'm withdrawing the charges against both of them. You can't just— One juror started. I can. I'm the marshal. And I'm saying this trial is over. But even as he spoke, I saw it in his face. The desperation. The need to save something, anything, from the wreckage of his authority. The head juror stood. Marshal, with respect, you've made accusations, brought evidence. We have to deliberate. That's how law works. Fletcher nodded, defeated. Then deliberate. The 12 men huddled. It didn't take long, maybe 5 minutes. Then the foreman stood. We find the defendant guilty on all charges. My stomach dropped. Despite everything, despite the truth laid bare, they'd chosen Fletcher's law over mercy. Sentencing? The foreman asked. Fletcher looked at me, looked at the noose swaying in the wind, looked at his brother's sad, disappointed face. Hanging, he said quietly. At noon. Marjorie screamed, tried to lunge toward me, but deputies held her back. And Mrs. Crane? The foreman asked. 3 years labor, county work farm. Fletcher couldn't meet her eyes. The child's remains will be disposed of per county code. That's the law. He walked away. Didn't run, but close. Just left the platform, left the crowd, left the whole mess he'd made behind him. Robert watched him go, then turned to me. I'm sorry. I'll appeal this. I'll get the territorial judge. Won't be time, I said. The math was simple. Noon was 6 hours away. Helena was 2 days' ride. They led us back to the cells. Marjorie was sobbing, reaching for me through the bars. I took her hands, held tight. Your daughter's name is Rose, I said. No matter what happens, you make sure someone remembers. You hear me? Someone has to remember. She nodded, but I don't think she heard. Just grief, loud and overwhelming. I sat on the cell floor, watched light creep across the stones, watched the hours count down. Josiah spoke from his cell. Brother, you made peace yet? Working on it. Work faster. You got 6 hours. I closed my eyes, thought about Martha, about the son I never met, about Rose waiting in her coffin for a burial that would never come. At least I'd tried. That was something. In a life full of running and hiding and keeping quiet, I'd finally stood up, even if it cost everything, even if it cost my life. Midnight came and went. I'd stopped tracking hours, just watched shadows move across stone as the moon traveled its arc. Marjorie had cried herself into exhausted sleep in the next cell. Josiah was silent, maybe praying in his own language. Me, I just sat. Then footsteps, quick, urgent, trying to be quiet. A key scraped in the lock. The cell door swung open. Reverend Stone stood there, lamp in one hand, ledger book in the other. His face was pale, but his eyes burned with something I'd never seen in him before. Purpose. Silas, get up. I stood slowly, joints stiff from cold stone. Reverend, what are you— Saving your life, maybe. He moved to Marjorie's cell, unlocked it. She stirred, confused. Mrs. Crane, wake up. We don't have much time. Time for what? I asked. Stone moved to Josiah's cell next. For justice. Real justice. Not Fletcher's version. Josiah stepped out, rubbing his wrists. About damn time. I don't understand, Marjorie said. Stone set the ledger on the deputy's desk. The guard was slumped in his chair, snoring. Empty whiskey bottle beside him. Stone saw me looking. I may have suggested he needed a drink to settle his nerves, Stone said, and I may have made that drink stronger than usual. Reverend, you drugged a deputy? I prefer to think I helped him rest. Stone opened the ledger to a marked page. But that's not what matters. This is. He pointed to Fletcher's arrest warrant. The official seal was clear in the lamplight. Territorial seal from 1875. Montana's operating under federal jurisdiction now, moving toward statehood. County marshals can't use old territorial seals for current warrants. This document is invalid. Fletcher don't know that? Josiah asked. Fletcher knows what he needs to know to maintain power. Details like legal procedure, he assumes no one checks. Stone flipped pages. I also looked at his appointment papers, signed by Judge Crawford. So? I said. So Crawford died 4 months ago. This signature is dated 2 weeks ago. Stone's finger traced the ink. It's forged. Fletcher's been operating without legal authority since Crawford's death. Every arrest, every warrant, technically illegal. The pieces started clicking together. Which means his charges against you have no legal standing. Stone pulled out another document. And there's more. Josiah mentioned checking land jurisdiction? Josiah nodded. The cemetery. Where's it sit exactly? Stone unrolled a survey map, traced boundaries. Here, edge of town. But look, his finger moved to a dotted line. This is the 1876 treaty adjustment. Some lands were returned to tribal oversight that year. I leaned closer. The cemetery sat 300 yards inside the new boundary. Tribal land, Josiah said softly, which means Fletcher has no jurisdiction over burials there. Tribal council does. And last I checked, we don't have a Paupers Act. Hope surged, dangerous and bright. So if we can get this to someone with real authority— Already done, Stone said. I sent Tommy riding 3 hours ago to the tribal council grounds. Josiah's cousin is a council elder. Josiah smiled. Little Hawk, good man. He sees this evidence, he'll issue a stay, declare Rose's burial a tribal matter. But that still leaves the arson charges, Marjorie said. The hanging, which are based on Fletcher's invalid authority. Stone gathered the papers. If his appointment is fraudulent, so are his legal actions. The door burst open. We all spun. Tommy stood there, gasping for breath, snow on his shoulders. Behind him, 6 riders. 5 tribal council members in traditional dress, and 1 white man in a judge's robes. Reverend, Tommy panted. I brought them. Just like you said. The robed man stepped forward. Late 50s, weathered face, sharp eyes. I'm Judge Markham, Territorial Circuit. I was visiting the tribal council on another matter when this young man arrived with quite a story. Stone handed him the documents. Markham read by lamplight, his expression darkening with each page. Good God, he muttered. Fletcher's been operating illegally for months? Yes, sir, Stone said. One of the tribal elders, older, gray-braided, wearing a ceremonial breastplate, stepped forward. I am Chief Little Hawk. The cemetery you speak of, it falls under our jurisdiction by treaty law. If Marshal Fletcher has interfered with tribal burial rights, he has violated federal treaty. Which is a federal crime, Markham added. He looked at me. Mr. Brennan, you're the one sentenced to hang? At noon. Yes, sir. Not anymore. Markham's voice carried authority that made Fletcher's seem like tin. Your charges are dismissed, all of them, based on invalid legal proceedings and fraudulent documentation. The words didn't feel real, like hearing them in a dream. And Mrs. Crane? Stone asked. Also dismissed. Markham turned to Little Hawk. Chief, about the child's burial. The child Rose Crane will be buried in the cemetery, Little Hawk said firmly. Today, with full honors, both tribal and church rights, and any man who opposes it answers to both councils. Agreed, Markham said. He looked at Stone. Reverend, you have documents proving the mother's burial rights? Stone held up the tithe records. 3 years of payment. Church covenant guarantees family burial. Then it's settled. Markham rolled up the documents. Now, where is Marshal Fletcher? He has some explaining to do. Probably at his office, I said. Then let's not keep him waiting. We walked out into the pre-dawn cold. Word had already spread somehow. Towns have a way of knowing when something important's happening. People lined the street, watching. The same crowd that had gathered for my trial now gathered for something else. Fletcher stood on his office porch, alone. He'd seen the riders, the judge, the council members. His face was the color of old paper. Markham approached, voice carrying in the cold air. Oswin Fletcher, you're under arrest for forgery, false imprisonment, fraud, and violation of federal treaty law. I was just enforcing county code, Fletcher said, but his voice was hollow. With forged documents and invalid authority. Markham nodded to the tribal council's guards. Take him. 2 men moved forward. Fletcher didn't resist. Just let them put shackles on his wrists, the same shackles he'd put on me hours earlier. I tried to keep order, he whispered as they led him past. I tried to make this town respectable. Respect isn't built on fear, Little Hawk said quietly. It's earned, through honor. They took him to the same cell I'd just left. The deputy was starting to wake, groggy and confused. I stood in the street, Marjorie beside me, and watched the sun finally break the horizon. Real sunrise, not the gray half-light I'd been living in. Is it over? Marjorie asked. The legal part, I said. Now comes the harder part. What's that? Burying your daughter, saying goodbye. I squeezed her hand. But this time, you won't be alone. Stone appeared at my shoulder. Noon cemetery. I'll ring the bell myself. Little Hawk nodded. We will be there, with songs for the small one's journey. Clyde emerged from the crowd, still carrying Rose's coffin. He'd kept it safe through the night somehow. I'll bring her proper, he said, with dignity. The crowd began to disperse. Some folks nodded as they passed. Others still looked away, uncomfortable with how close they'd come to letting an innocent man hang. But a few, Mrs. Yates, Old Man Chen, Tommy, a handful of others, they stayed. "We'll be there too," Mrs. Yates said. "At noon. For Rose." One by one, others murmured agreement. Not the whole town, but enough. Enough to prove that when law failed, sometimes people remembered how to be human. Marjorie leaned against me, exhausted but no longer broken. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything." "Thanks, Stone," I said. "He's the one who found the answer." "No," Stone said quietly. "You gave me the courage to look. That's worth more than answers." The sun climbed higher. The gallows stood empty in the square, noose swaying in wind that no longer felt quite so cold. By noon, it would be dismantled. And by noon, a baby named Rose would finally rest where she belonged. The cemetery gates stood open. Noon's sun broke through clouds, melting snow on grave markers that stretched back generations. Some stones were grand, marble angels and carved verses. Others were simple wood crosses, names barely legible, but they all meant the same thing. Someone had mattered enough to be remembered. Now Rose would join them. Clyde led the procession, carrying the small coffin on his shoulders like it weighed the world. Behind him, Marjorie walked steady, head high. I walked beside her. Then Stone in his vestments, Little Hawk in ceremonial dress, and behind them, I stopped, turned to look. 80 people, maybe more. Townspeople who'd watched the trial, who'd seen Fletcher's fall, who'd decided that showing up mattered more than staying comfortable. Mrs. Yates was there, Old Man Chen, Tommy and his father, families I barely knew. Even a few who'd nodded approvingly when Fletcher arrested me. Now they came, shamefaced but present. Beatrice walked near the front, arm linked with Robert Fletcher. He'd helped organize this, insisted on being here to honor what his brother had tried to destroy. We reached the grave. Men had worked through the morning to dig it. The ground was still half frozen, had taken pickaxes and sweat to break through. But they'd done it, made a place for her. Stone began. "We gather to lay to rest Rose Elaine Crane, 6 months in this world, beloved daughter, known to God and to those who fought for her dignity." Little Hawk spoke next, in Blackfoot first, then English. "Small one, may your journey be safe. May the earth hold you gently. May your name be remembered in the stories we tell." Clyde lowered the coffin on ropes. It settled soft at the bottom, that white cotton lining bright against dark earth. Marjorie knelt at the edge, pulled out the pink ribbon, Elwood's last gift, and dropped it in. "Your daddy loved you," she whispered. "He'd be so proud you're resting proper." Then she did something I didn't expect. Pulled off her wedding ring, thin gold band, all she had left of her husband, and placed it in the grave, too. "We're together now," she said. "All 3 of us, just in different ways." I felt my pocket, where my own wedding ring had rested for 8 years, pulled it out. Looked at it one last time. Worn smooth, Martha's initials inside barely visible. Then I placed it beside Rose's coffin. "Martha," I said quietly. "Meet Rose. Take care of her till her mama comes. And tell our son, tell him I finally learned what you tried to teach me, that moving forward don't mean forgetting." Stone read verses. Little Hawk sang a blessing. Then it was time. Each mourner placed a handful of earth, not burying, planting. That's how Beatrice had said it. We plant their memory, and it grows. The grave filled slow. When it was done, Clyde produced a wooden cross he'd carved. Simple pine, but the letters were deep and clear. Rose Elaine Crane, beloved daughter, February 10th, February 12th, 1883. She was known. He planted it firm at the head of the grave. For a long moment, no one moved, just stood there, witness to a life that had been 6 months long, but somehow large enough to change a town. Then the crowd began to shift, not leaving, gathering closer. Around Marjorie, Mrs. Yates spoke first. "You'll stay with me till you get on your feet." No argument. The shopkeeper, I need help in the store. Fair wages. Tommy. I'll make sure your husband's back wages get paid. Got the records? They owe you 3 weeks. One by one, people offered what they could. Work, housing, help. A town that had watched her beg and turned away was now surrounding her with care. Marjorie looked overwhelmed. I don't know how to. You just say yes, Beatrice said gently, and let folks be decent, that's all. Marjorie nodded, tears streaming. Yes, thank you, all of you. The crowd began to disperse, but slowly. People stopped to speak to Marjorie, to me, to each other. Something had shifted, something that couldn't be undone. I stood at Rose's grave, felt Beatrice come up beside me. You did good, Silas, she said. Didn't do much, just refused to walk away. That's more than most. She paused. What'll you do now? House is gone. Barn too. I looked around the cemetery. At the people helping Marjorie. At Stone and Little Hawk speaking like old friends. At Clyde showing Tommy how to carve letters deep enough to last. Rebuild, I suppose. Land's still there. And turns out, when you stop living alone, people show up to help. They do indeed. Beatrice smiled. Your Martha would be proud. Hope so. Movement at the cemetery gate. 2 deputies leading Fletcher in shackles. Judge Markham had ordered him to see the burial before his transfer to territorial prison. Wanted him to understand what his laws had tried to prevent. Fletcher stood at the back, watching. His face was impossible to read. Shame, grief, anger, regret, all mixed together. When it was done, when the last person had paid respects and left, Fletcher approached the grave. The deputies stayed back, giving him space. He stared at that small cross for a long time. I'm sorry, he finally said. To the grave, to Marjorie, to me, to everyone. I'm sorry. I could have said nothing. Could have let him carry that weight alone. But I thought about Martha's last words, don't stop living. And I thought about what Stone had said. Forgiveness ain't forgetting. It's just refusing to let hate build a new prison. Fletcher, I said. He looked up, eyes red. You can't bury shame, but you can outgrow it, if you try. He nodded slowly. Didn't speak, just let the deputies lead him away. Robert watched his brother go, sadness deep in his face. Think he'll change? Don't know, but showing him mercy gives him the chance. That's all any of us can do. The sun was high now, snow melting fast. Spring was coming. Not today, but soon. Marjorie joined me at the grave one last time. We stood together, 2 people who'd been strangers 3 days ago and now felt like family. What do we do now? She asked. We live, I said. We remember her, and we try to be worth the fight we put up. She took my hand. Not romantic, just human. 2 people who'd survived something together and would carry it forward. Thank you, Silas, for seeing her, for making sure the world saw her too. She was easy to see, I said. People just needed to open their eyes. We walked out of the cemetery together. Behind us, Rose's cross stood firm against the sky, marking a place where dignity had been planted and, against all odds, had grown. That was February 1883. 42 years ago now. I'm an old man telling you this from a porch in spring, watching flowers bloom where snow used to pile. The Montana wind still cuts cold sometimes, but it don't bite like it used to. Or maybe I just learned to stop flinching. Marjorie stayed in Townsend, worked at Mrs. Yates's boarding house, saved her pennies. 10 years later, she remarried. Carpenter named Samuel, good man who knew grief when he saw it and didn't run from it. They had 3 children, named their first daughter Rose. Brought her to the grave every spring, taught her the story. Fletcher served 3 years, got out early for good behavior. Last I heard, he works at a mission in Helena. Feeds folks who can't pay. Funny how close shame and redemption live to each other when you finally stop running. Beatrice lived to 93. Left money to build a children's hospital. Named it after her daughter, the one the town forgot. Now, nobody can. Clyde still builds coffins. But now he builds cradles too. Says life and death need the same care. He's right. Stone found his spine that night and never lost it again. Preach is different now. Less about rules, more about seeing people. Church is fuller than it's been in years. And me? I rebuilt the ranch. Lived there 30 more years before my bones said otherwise. Never remarried. Wasn't that kind of love twice in a lifetime. But I wasn't alone. Folks came by regular. Fixed fences, shared meals. Turns out when you stop protecting yourself from pain, you stop protecting yourself from life too. I visit Rose's grave when I can. The cross has been replaced 3 times, but someone always maintains it. Fresh flowers appear every spring. Pink ribbon tied to new wood. Someone still remembers. Maybe that's the point of all this. Maybe dignity ain't about grand gestures or perfect justice. Maybe it's just about seeing suffering and deciding it matters. Even when, especially when, nobody's watching. The ground froze that winter, but mercy didn't. And every spring since, flowers grow where we thought nothing could. If this story touched you, if you're sitting there with wet eyes and a full heart, then do me a favor, tell someone, share it, let it echo. Because stories only live when they're passed on, and dignity only grows when we keep planting it. May your winters be short. May you be the one who kneels when others walk past. May you remember that the smallest life can cast the longest shadow if someone's willing to stand in its light. And may you never forget, Rose Elaine Crane, 6 months old, known, remembered, loved. That's all any of us really want in the end, to be known.